my friends are Sims.
A while back, I did a video looking at this awesome standalone video synthesizer called Hypno from Sleepy Circuits. Hypno's visuals have got loads of different parameters that you can tweak in real time, but given the limited panel space on such a portable wee device, you kind of really need to use a MIDI controller to get the most out of it. As we all know, setting up custom MIDI templates is nice in theory, but it takes some time to do and can be pretty fucking tedious to say the least. So to make things far more convenient, Sleepy have now released a brand new device to go along with Hypno called Mezzz. They've sent me one over to check out, and that's obviously what I'm going to be looking at today. Mezzz is a portable, handheld MIDI controller which has got some especially interesting features, including haptic feedback, an internal gyroscope, and a dedicated Hypno mirroring mode. Supports MIDI over USB as well as Bluetooth, and it's got a built-in battery, which is rated for something like 5 hours operation. It comes in a really compact wee package with 8 push encoders that allow you to control up to 64 different parameters per MIDI channel, spread across 8 different pages. There's also 3 additional buttons that give you access to various other settings. There's a single USB-C port on there, which is used for USB MIDI, firmware updates and charging the battery, and there's a USB-C to USB Type-A cable included in the box. Along with that, you also get a carabiner and a wrist strap, the idea being that you can use these along with the built-in belt hook to attach Mezzz onto your clothes or bag or whatever else, and make use of the gyroscope to control additional parameters via MIDI CC as you move about. Now this might initially seem like a wee bit of a gimmick, but it's actually a pretty cool idea when you consider that Mezzz has been designed specifically with video art apps in mind. If you're a solo performer, for example, like myself, I guess sometimes, this means that you can dance around badly or well, depending on your particular abilities, and have the visuals move about with you whilst you're busy triggering clips or tweaking filter cutoffs or whatever else, which is actually fairly smart, I think. Now, as a MIDI controller, Mezzz can obviously be used for a bunch of different purposes. It's tiny and portable and handy for controlling all of the usual stuff like VSTs in your DAW, the Arturia V-Suite, all that kind of stuff. However, it's primarily been designed to work with Sleepy Circuits video software, including Hypno, but also vidOS. As a result, some of the more general features like remapping the encoders to different CC values are still in development at the minute and actively being updated as I speak. The main thing I'm interested in looking at today though is how this thing works with Hypno. To use these two together, you first have to make sure that your firmware is up to date on both devices. After that is done, it's as simple as connecting them together, switching Mezzz to channel 16 via one of the shoulder buttons, and away you go. You'll know you're on the right mode when the LEDs on Mezzz change to match those on Hypno, which is pretty cool indeed. You can connect Mezzz up directly to Hypno with a USB cable, of course, but if you want to cut the cords, you could use something like the CME Woody Bud Pro, which is this wee USB dongle thing that plugs into Hypno and allows it to connect to Mezzz via Bluetooth. This gives you a lot more freedom to then move around with Mezzz as a kind of remote controller, whilst Hypno remains stationary, plugged into your projector or, modular system or whatever it might be. One thing you watch out for is that the arrangement of the USB and HDMI ports on the Raspberry Pi, which power Hypno, can be quite close together, and so depending on what model you have and the size of your USB sticks, you might need to do some jiggery-pokery to get them to fit. Mine worked fine, but I can't have the CME Woody USB dongle next to the HDMI connection because they're both too wide, so I have to put the CME in the one above. Something to be aware of. Anyway, for a brief overview of the way that Hypno mirroring mode works with Mezzz, first you have to make sure that you've got Mezzz oriented the right way. The circle symbol in the outer ring indicates the bottom, and then the 2 shoulder switches will sit conveniently within reach of your fingers. You'll know when it's correct because it just feels right ergonomically. In terms of how the controls are laid out, 2 of the knobs at the bottom of Mezzz act as dedicated switches which, when pressed, go between the different modes that are available on Hypno. Shape A is on the left and Shape B is on the right. The LEDs here change colour to match those on Hypno, reflecting the active mode, which I think is a really cool feature. Turning either of these knobs corresponds to the values controlled by the slider for each channel, A on the left and B on the right. The other 6 encoders represent the 6 different pages of video effects controls that are available in Hypno. Pressing any of these down will open a particular page, which then gives you 8 parameters to play with per page, represented of course by the 8 knobs on Mezzz. The bottom encoder, for example, loads up the controls that correspond to those on the front panel of Hypno. The upper left 2 knobs relate to shape and video controls for channel A. Similarly, the upper right 2 knobs relate to shape and video controls for channel B. The top knob opens up a page when pressed, which contains video feedback controls. The type of feedback can be cycled through using the central button. You can save or load presets using Mezzz by holding down 2 neighbouring encoder buttons and then either holding or tapping a third, depending on what you want to achieve. So I believe holding the third down saves a preset, and tapping the third knob will recall the preset associated with that particular knob. In practice, I found Mezzz to be a brilliant companion to Hypno and a lot of fun to use actually. It breaks out all the different parameters of Hypno in a convenient but also quite compact package. At first I was a wee bit concerned that I was never going to be able to remember what the various knobs did, but it's actually fairly straightforward, and in fact the arrangement of controls into pages like this, which are clearly tied to specific knobs, has actually made it much simpler and easier to understand the various features and layout of Hypno itself, which was otherwise a bit hard to visualise at times in my head with everything buried underneath in MIDI CC values. The haptic feedback in particular is one feature that I found especially useful about Mezzz because it lets you feel when you make a value change. You can turn that off if you don't like, but from my point of view, it makes it much easier to browse through the different folders and media files that you've got loaded in via a USB stick, for example, which can otherwise be challenging if you've got quite a lot on there like I do. Just being able to feel when you shift the value in general, I think, is really useful. I can see how handy this whole setup would be in a live setting where I could have Hypno wired up to the projector, with Mezzz connected to Hypno via Bluetooth, within easy reach of my Dirty Wave M8 or music gear, meaning that I could just pick up and tweak the parameters on Mezzz whilst dancing about like an idiot. As the additional firmware updates roll in, I'm definitely going to be trying out Mezzz in some more conventional ways as a kind of regular MIDI controller, if you will, because it seems like a brilliant companion for devices like Norns, for example. In the meantime though, I'm enjoying Mezzz purely as a bestie for Hypno. It makes it much nicer to use, but also I just always welcome creative new ideas, especially in the relatively underdeveloped world of video art. It seems like Sleepy are especially interested in exploring the possibilities and pushing the envelope in that regard, and I'm looking forward to seeing what else they come up with in future. If you're interested in finding out more about this, the link is below. You know how the internet works. I'm not going to explain it to you. Have a wonderful time today and tomorrow and every other day.